Thanks, Dennis. I'm trying to talk without a microphone, but let me know if this becomes a problem. So far, are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm happy to be here. I was delighted to have been invited, and had been planning for a while to try to expand my message beyond West Michigan. I'm usually spending my time in West Michigan or in D.C., and I wanted to get around other parts of the state to start to spread the message of liberty more and more. I think it's important that people hear different perspectives throughout the state. Oftentimes you'll see on TV a particular Republican perspective, and I think actually that Republican perspective that you often see on TV is becoming the minority perspective in Congress, and the more popular perspective is the one that I'm going to talk about today. I think it's amongst young Republicans, new Republicans elected to Congress, more and more of them are holding views that would be described as more libertarian-leaning, with a strong belief in following the Constitution, a belief in limited government, in economic freedom, and in individual liberty. Those are certainly the things I'm about. And people like me will get attacked by those like Karl Rove. You may have seen recently he called me the most liberal Republican in Congress. And the day after he said I was the most liberal Republican in Congress, I received the Freedom Fighter Award from FreedomWorks for my 100% score in 2012. I've kept a 100% score from FreedomWorks, 100% score from Club for Growth. I'm not doing anything to try to achieve those scores. It just happens to be that I vote that way. And I think it's important that we have congressmen who stick to their principles and fight for our liberty, all of our liberty, not just some of it. Fight to defend the entire Constitution.
Yes.
And one of the areas where we're seeing massive erosion in government is in the Fourth Amendment. Our Fourth Amendment protections are being eroded. There was a DNA case recently where the government could take your DNA simply upon arrest. That was upheld by the Supreme Court. There was a great dissent by Justice Scalia in that case. But more recently, what we're seeing is the government is using its surveillance powers through the new technology that's developed over the years to keep track of all of Americans' records. So every phone record that is out there is being kept by the government. Now, what does that mean? That means that the government doesn't think you have any expectation of privacy in your phone records. They think that it is reasonable to seize all of your phone records. And they argue that that's not a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And I'm here to tell you that regardless of what you'll see on TV from Republican and Democratic defenders of this program and President Obama, you should know that it is outrageous. It's not acceptable. And I think what a lot of people in Congress and in government want to do is to keep saying over and over that it's reasonable, it's okay, until the public says, you know, it's not that bad, it's okay. They want you to get complacent about this stuff. Because it starts with your phone records and then it goes to other things. And to be clear, the government's legal theory, its flawed legal theory, is simply that you don't have an expectation of privacy in anything that a third party has. So if a third party has one of your documents or one of your records, you don't have an expectation of privacy in that document, and therefore the federal government can just access it. They can demand it from the third party. Now, if that's their legal theory, you should know that it may be true that now it's just your phone records. I don't know for sure, because I can't get access to all the classified information, believe it or not, even as a congressman. They won't share that information with rank and file members. But let's suppose that it is just your phone records now. Under their legal theory, they can access things beyond your phone records. It's not just your phone records. Because under their legal theory, if you take a picture on your phone, let's say you have an iPhone and you take a picture or you take a video, and it's uploaded to the cloud, either to be saved there or as a backup, the government believes that that is not protected by the Fourth Amendment. They can then go to the cloud, they can go to Apple and say, we demand these photos, And they can get broad, sweeping requests to get everyone's photos, all Americans. They can demand all of your videos, and Apple will have to provide it under the government's order, and they will say that that is legal under the Fourth Amendment, that that's acceptable. Now, of course, that's a ludicrous reading of the Fourth Amendment. If you believe that interpretation of the Fourth Amendment, then the Fourth Amendment has no meaning in the modern era. Because most of our papers and effects are kept digitally now. If the Fourth Amendment only applies to the papers we have in our home, then it's not going to have that much of a meaning in an era where we write things and send it out over the internet, or we save files in things like Dropbox or on Google Drive. It's not going to have much meaning. So we have a DoD appropriations bill coming up this week. It's really important to be aware of this and to contact your congressmen, contact your senators, contact others. Make sure that they are aware of what's coming up. The House will be voting on a DoD appropriations bill, and I'm going to offer an amendment or amendments to defund this NSA surveillance on Americans. What we're concerned will happen, and what we're hearing hints of, is that House leadership, this is Republican leadership, wants to stop amendments like mine. And so they are going to, for the first time in recent memory, try to limit debate and limit amendments that may be offered. Normally this is an open process for DoD appropriations, Department of Defense appropriations. You can just offer an amendment, it'll go to Rules Committee, there's a wide open process, there might be many amendments on the floor that can be voted on. This year, for the first time in recent memory, and maybe in history, I don't know, I only know recent memory, they're going to do what's called a structured rule, which means they're not going to allow you to offer anything. They're going to limit it, and they're going to decide what can be offered. So it's really important that members of Congress understand that this is wrong to have this type of process, that they have to accept amendments like mine that allow the American people to have a voice on this issue. We should be allowed to have a vote on amendments like mine, not just this issue, but other issues like arming Syrian rebels. These all fall under DoD appropriations. We should be allowed to have a vote and let the people's representatives speak on this issue. And if it passes, it passes. But we should have the ability to vote on it. It shouldn't be something that's kept, that can't be touched. And that's one thing I'm worried about this coming week. So please contact your congressman. Please contact other representatives throughout the country. Make sure that they are aware of the importance of having the proper amendments this week on DoD appropriations, that we deserve the chance to vote yes or no on whether or not the government can gather all of our phone records. We deserve that opportunity. I'm also working with Congressman Conyers on legislation, and it's related to this surveillance. Congressman Conyers and I are working on amending the Patriot Act. And the reason the government is able to gather all of your records, the legal reason they give, besides the fact that they don't think the Fourth Amendment applies, the legal justification they're giving is that they think that all of your phone records are relevant, quote, relevant, to investigating terrorism. The Patriot Act said that the government can gather records that are relevant to the investigation of terrorism. And for many people who voted for the Patriot Act, I'm not one of them, but say what had happened in 2001, they thought that relevant meant relevant to the person under investigation. So you're investigating someone who's suspected of terrorism, then you can gather documents that are relevant, that are related to that investigation. The government has stretched it through secret court opinions, as we've seen reported in the news, to mean just useful. Any documents that are useful to the investigation of terrorism generally. And since all of your records are useful in their mind, they are all relevant. And they think, therefore, that gathering all of your records complies with the Patriot Act. Now, I think the Patriot Act has other problems, But this is certainly a stretch of what was intended when the Patriot Act was passed. So even if you or others supported the Patriot Act when it was passed, which I did not, and have not voted for its renewal either, even if you supported the Patriot Act, this is a clear stretch of what the Patriot Act should allow. The gathering of everyone's phone records and other records. And the other thing that's important to note in our legislation is we're also trying to allow all members of Congress to access FISA court opinions. The FISA court is the secret court that interprets things like the Patriot Act. Currently, rank-and-file members of Congress, like me, and like most of the Michigan delegation, are not allowed to see the court opinions. So there are court opinions interpreting the Patriot Act, how it's being applied, the court's applying the law. There are court opinions interpreting the Patriot Act. They are able to gather information on all Americans and do all sorts of other things, and I'm not allowed to read the court opinion, and I'm a member of Congress. How can Congress amend broken legislation if we're not allowed to read the opinions? Now, there are people who defend these things and will say, well, the court opinions are shared with the Intelligence Committee, as though the Intelligence Committee is Congress. The Intelligence Committee is not Congress. Congress is Congress. And when the Constitution says Congress is part of the federal government, that there's a legislative branch, they mean the entire legislative branch. They don't mean just those who President Obama or House leadership decides deserve to have the information. The Constitution means everyone in Congress should be able to access that information because we all have to represent our constituents and we all deserve that kind of access. The last thing that the bill that Conyers and I are working on, we've already offered it. It has about 40 co-sponsors, half Republican, half Democratic. I want to let you know. So it's a very bipartisan proposal. It has a lot of support, conservatives to liberals and libertarians. It's got them all on this legislation. The last thing it does is it allows declassified summaries of all these opinions to be made available to the public. So if they're worried about classified information getting out to the public and being a danger to society, in the very least, they should offer declassified summaries of the relevant opinions so that people at home can also know how the law is being applied. You can have secret operations in a free country, but you can't have secret laws. And what we have right now are secret laws, and that has to stop. And with that, I want to open it up to questions so that you guys can get the most out of this while I'm here. Thanks.
Intelligence Committee Chair Mike Rogers, is he aware of your amendment to the bill regarding the NSA and does he support it?
I can't say whether he'll support it or not. I can't say whether he's aware of it or not either. But there are news stories about it today, so I'm hopeful that he does know about it at this point. Yeah.
How is it that they classify our records, whether it be phone, email, or whatever, as business records? I know they're used to make a phone bill, or they're used for, but isn't that what they're using to gather it all? We're allowed to get business records.
Sure, that's how they often phrase it. But actually, the Patriot Act says that they can gather tangible things, and tangible things, I think, was Congress's way of saying they can't take away your hope or your joy or other intangible. They can't take away, they can't break your spirit, because pretty much tangible means anything that has matter, as far as I'm concerned. And so the Patriot Act is written broadly enough to gather not just business records, but anything tangible, which is everything. Everything except your dreams and beliefs and
I'd like to address these. I don't know if you've heard of them, fusion centers, and this is part of where the NSA is actually gathering this data. How about that we defund the building of this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And also, when I talk to AT&T about, I say, what happens to my email if I accidentally delete it? Oh, it's gone. Well, if it's gone, that's what they tell me, then it should be gone. Why are these people even saving my email? Or why is it that their business to save my stuff?
well, they will argue that it's their business to save the stuff because it could be used for later terrorism investigation. That's what the government will say.
AT&T says that?
That's what the government will say. I can't speak for AT&T. I would say that a lot of the companies feel pressure to work with the government on issues like this.
Well, but the company should just say, you know, they told me it's gone. It should be gone.
Yeah, it might be gone from, and I can't again speak for AT&T,
Yeah.
but let's say a generic company might no longer have the document on their own servers,
Yeah.
but the government might have the document on its servers. And your point about defunding the government servers is a good one, and I'll take that back
Turn
to
off their
my
electricity.
staff and talk about that. Yeah. In the ring, yeah.
What can we do to help you get that clown Boehner out of the speakership position?
Let me put it this way. I won't. I'm not going to spend a long time on this question. You can do a lot worse than Speaker Boehner. I have personal relationships with my colleagues, and you might find this hard to believe. I believe Speaker Boehner actually is a good man. I disagree with him on policy. I think he's a better speaker than a lot of the other options we might have. So you have to be careful what you wish for. He's not necessarily the right speaker for this generation of Republicans. There's a new generation of Republicans that thinks differently than his generation thought. And I don't just mean age. I mean just the new thinking by Republican rank and file and grassroots. But you can do a lot worse. Yeah.
So the courts have held up for a long time that you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy in a third person or with your phone records. So I guess I could see how they could say that applies now with the modern technology, like a cloud technology. So what is the counter legal argument for that that's no longer a reasonable assurance?
Yeah, they're basing it on a case called Smith v. Maryland from 1979. And in that case, and the government clearly rests on this decision, they've made that clear in all of their documents and all of their talking points. In Smith v. Maryland, one person was under suspicion because he was harassing someone. And so the government decided to keep track of this one person's phone calls who was under suspicion using something called a pen register, which is not anything like a modern computer, none of the abilities. It couldn't even tell the duration of the call. It couldn't even tell you if the call was connected. But it kept track of the phone calls. And in that case, the court said he didn't have an expectation of privacy in his phone calls. Now, I don't think that case applies to modern times. I don't think it's even on point because you're talking about one person who's under suspicion. We're now talking about gathering the phone records of all Americans who are not under suspicion of terrorism. So it's much broader now, and the technology is very different. The court, if anything, that case works in the favor of people like me who think that it's unconstitutional. Because the case made clear they were talking about one person who was under suspicion, and the technology was very limited. You have more recent court decisions, like a case dealing with GPS tracking, in which the Supreme Court has indicated that they want to move away from this third-party doctrine. And that's why I believe that if a case came up related to this NSA surveillance, it would be ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Yeah.
I have a question for you. It's more of a public relations one. Who names these different bills? Because when you talk to the unengaged, the person that reads newspaper the Sunday before the election, the Patriot Act to them sounds something good because it's patriotic.
Yep.
When in essence we're talking about the reversal of Freedom Act. So, I mean, it's just a public relations thing here because you can't really talk to them about the meaning of it because all they get are the one-sentence blurbs. So, how does that happen?
Both sides do it. You get to name your own bill. Our bill to counter the Patriot Act is called the Liberty Act. So, so each side gets to come up. You can come up with your own acronym or whatever when you write a bill. I try to avoid acronyms. I don't really like them, but someone came up with Liberty, and we went with it. And in this case, because you're countering some of the Patriot Act, I think it's fine to have something that a good word to counter it with.
Yeah, so when we were looking at the news, my father and I, we were looking at how, as he mentioned, AT&T and all these companies like Microsoft and Apple have all this information and they're forced to work with the government. And frankly, I don't put most of that blame on the companies because, like you said, the government puts pressure on them. One of the bigger problems that I have is that they have gag orders on these companies that they can lie to us and tell them that we're not working with the government, even though they are. And so at the very least, the companies should be telling us so that, if I'm using Google, I can know that, they're working with the government, my information may go to them. How do you prevent them from ordering these gag orders on these private companies to lie to their customers? I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you prevent that. I mean, when the government puts pressure on these companies through a variety of means, you can imagine some of them. There are contracts, government contracts. There's a lot of financial pressure. There are other incentives that the government may offer to companies to work with them. But at the end of the day, a lot of these companies like to look like the government. They like it to look like the government is forcing them to do it. It's better for them from a PR perspective than looking like they're voluntarily giving the information to the government. On CISPA, that's the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act, I offered an amendment simply to say that companies can contract with their customers or their employees to guarantee the privacy of the information you share with them. Because under CISPA, it actually provided immunity to companies to provide any information with the government. Now, the way it was sold to members of Congress and to the public, those who were paying enough attention to it, was that, we're not, the companies aren't going to give away just your emails and stuff, it's all about zeros and ones, etc. The bill actually says companies can provide any information they think is related to a cyber attack. Of course, if a company has immunity from liability and they can provide any information related to a cyber attack, they're going to just want to provide their whole database to the government, database of information. Why would they take the chance? They don't want to look like they are not being careful about some security risk. So they'll just provide all the information. They're provided immunity from liability. I offered an amendment simply to say, if a company tells you that your privacy is guaranteed, then they can be held liable if they break that guarantee. If they break that contract, they can be held liable. It doesn't force them to guarantee privacy. They could write in their contract with you, we don't guarantee any privacy. We may share your information with the government. We may share your information with your neighbors. They could write that in the contract, and you could still work with them if you'd like to. So my amendment would have just said they can contract. They can put whatever they want in it. They don't have to put any contract. They don't have to put any guarantee if they don't want. My amendment was ruled out of order. It was ruled out of order because it became clear to me, and has become even clearer to me after all these leaks recently, that the government and the companies don't want to be put in a situation where they could be held liable. They don't even want to compete on privacy. They don't want it. They'd rather just have the government say, you have to do it, and there's no way around it. Because as soon as they have to compete on privacy, you have little companies that come in and say, hey, we'll promise to keep your stuff secure. We're not going to work with the government. We're not going to work with the government except in a way that we think is securing the data of our customers. And those companies will start to take business from the bigger companies that are established. And nobody wants that. The government doesn't want that, and the big companies don't want that.
Sure,
so they try to they ruled my amendment out of order.
What prevents that from happening now? What specific prohibitions are there to companies servicing the liberty market for communications, financial transactions? Set aside financial, I know there's laws. In a communications scenario, what would prevent someone, either onshore or offshore,
you can
to provide a secure solution?
You could make a guarantee, but there's no way to enforce it. In other words, a company can still guarantee. They can say, look, we'll keep your stuff secure, but the law says that there's no enforcement mechanism because if the government says we want the information, they're going to provide it. There's no enforcement mechanism. They won't be held liable.
Well, they have to provide it to the government if they're contractually bound not to provide it.
Yes, they still have to provide it to the government.
But, okay. Well,
and then they wouldn't be held liable. So there would be no way to sue them for that.
Without a warrant?
So it'd have to be
Would
offshore.
we be held liable without a warrant?
They would.
If my
They would.
phone company gives my data out, or my doctor gives my data out without a warrant, I can't sue them for that, for breaching my contract.
Not under CISPA.
Now, to what he just said, and back to previously to add what I said, if these people aren't storing it, then they can't give it to them. If my phone calls and my stuff are truly gone when I'm done,
Yeah.
I erase them on my own and they're gone, then AT&T shouldn't be storing them. So how about we just attack the fact that these people shouldn't be storing my stuff at all? It's like an analog phone call. You make the phone call, it's gone.
But the government is gathering the data.
No, but I'm saying
Real time, they're getting a copy of it as it occurs.
as it
The
occurs.
same building they have all these switch places, the government has a tap going in. It's like every Wired magazine, it's all in there.
I don't know how much I don't know what's been disclosed or not, and I have to be careful about what I say too.
I'd like to switch gears if I could for a minute. I know you've got cultural ties to the Middle East. It seems every regime or person we've been on as a country, we guess wrong. We've got this new Arab Spring or this renewance. Just your thoughts, and should we be sending aid over to Egypt right now? Or
No, we shouldn't be sending aid to Egypt, and I said that long ago. The aid is going to, or was going to, a Muslim Brotherhood-controlled government, clearly not an ally of the United States. I don't know why we're sending money, particularly to governments that are against this, to regimes that are against this. But at the same time, it's hard to predict who's going to turn against you and who's going to be a good ally in the future. Ultimately, our involvement with other countries should be with respect to trade. We should be able to trade with other countries. We should have freedom of exchange with other countries. And if we have a threat against our country, a direct threat, where we are under attack, actually under attack, or there is an imminent attack about to happen, then we should be able to go to war as necessary, or do whatever it takes to secure the American people. But other than that, we shouldn't be going in there and meddling.
Hey, what's the status for the Audit the Fed bill that's in the House right now?
It's getting co-sponsors. It's Paul Brown has the bill this term, and he's continuing to gather co-sponsors. I don't know whether we'll get a vote on it or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if it has as many co-sponsors as last time. It probably has the same co-sponsors.
Yeah, earlier you said you don't think we should be sending our enemies aid. Do you think we should be sending any foreign aid?
No, I don't. I think it's something that has to be phased out. It is not a huge portion of the federal budget, to be clear, but it's something that should be phased out because I don't think it does us any benefit. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, are you aware of the trap wire through the country? It's called trap wire. All the new street lights and dealy-doos, it's all through the United States. I just got back from New Orleans. And if you look it up, it was I believe, developed by 2 CIA officers. And it's all hooked up there. All these new, every time I call the transportation department, they won't even tell me what it is, but it's all the new street lights and it's got cameras in it. It's supposed to hook up with your driver's license and they can track you clear across the country, know exactly where you're going. It's called trap wire.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it.
How did this ever get set up? Because when I asked somebody in Oakland County about it, they said they put it up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And it's called trap wire, so maybe you could look into it.
I'll take a look. I don't know enough about that. I know, like in places like DC, they have every police car is equipped with like these license plate readers, and they keep track of everywhere you go. And if they have enough police cars or enough cameras, they're obviously keeping track of exactly where you are.
It's all through the country.
Yep.
With the cameras and everything.
Tom, yeah.
I applaud you for everything that you're doing on privacy, and I think you're a hero for all of us. It seems like your only leverage, though, I mean, the bill with Conyers is good, but it seems like your real leverage comes with the debt ceiling or the CR votes, where probably the Democrats are opposed to it, so you just need to get 12 or 15 members. Can you get that for some of these issues we're dealing with, and really for the next vote, deal with something and really, whether it's defunding or, it just seems like that's your leverage point. I did something similar with Common Core here. That's when you do it, is during budget issues.
Yeah. Well, first, it's good to see you again. And thanks for the question. I think we have leverage on DoD approach, actually, because before every vote on the bill, there's a rule vote. It's a procedural vote, and we have to have a vote on how the debate is going to be structured. And on rule votes, the Democrats always vote no on the rule, and Republicans always vote yes. Because Democrats always vote no on it, you can actually stop debate from even proceeding on the bill if you just get, I think, well, I don't know how many Republicans it is, but it's 15, 20 Republicans flip on it, and you can basically stop the bill. We have those numbers to do that. So I think leadership is either going to have to agree to our demands on this, agree to allow us to offer reasonable, real amendments on the floor, not the bogus amendments that they'd like to see. They always want to put some kind of phony amendment that looks like it does something but actually doesn't do anything. We want a real amendment on the floor for a vote. And if that's the case, then we let the rule proceed. If that's not the case, then we should vote down the rule and not let the bill proceed. If they want to fund the Department of Defense, then they have to take seriously that the American people should not be spied on. And we deserve the chance to at least have a vote on it and get every member of Congress on the record. Which member of Congress wants the government to spy on you? Which member of Congress doesn't want government to spy on you? Let's get everyone on the record. You can see why they don't want that vote. Yes.
Congressman, National Taxpayers Union tonight asked that we contact our congressman regarding two bills that have to do with Obamacare. The first one is cleverly called the Authority for Mandate Delay Act, and the second one is the Fairness for American Families Act. You familiar with this?
I think I am. I don't know what the bill titles. I assume the first one is to delay the employer mandate, and the second one is to delay the individual mandate.
Indeed. What chances do those have of passing?
I think pretty good chances. There are some Republicans, and this is actually a debate amongst conservatives in the House. There are some Republicans who believe we shouldn't delay Obamacare at all. You should let it take effect for two reasons. One is, as soon as you delay it for a year, they think, this is not my opinion, but they think that it's like voting for Obamacare. You're voting to have it implemented a year from now. They also think that, look, the Democrats and President Obama wanted this, and they think that this was good for the American people. Let's let the American people see how it actually works. And they believe people will be outraged about it, and it will be repealed pretty quickly. There are others who say, no, it's wrong to have Obamacare implemented at all. If you can delay it 1 year or 2 years or 5 years, you should do that. And I think I fall into that camp. And that camp would be, that we'd be the ones who'd say, yeah, let's vote yes on those bills. I think there are yeah, two bills.
Yeah. You want to delay both? You want to delay both?
Employer mandate and individual mandate.
The whole bill off.
Well, we voted many times to repeal Obamacare. I have never voted for appropriating money for Obamacare. That's not true of all Republicans. There's funding that goes in the appropriations bills. I've always voted no on those. So I don't view it as voting in support of Obamacare if you vote to delay it 1 year, but there are others who think otherwise. So it's a fair debate. Yeah.
I was told that sections 1021 and 1022 were not in the 2014 NDAA, and I've looked at it. I don't see them in there. Do you know, are those sections?
No.
They're not in there? Then do the previous years, do they roll over? Do they expire?
Each NDAA has authorizations that apply for the current year and also law that would apply continuously. So in the 2012 NDAA, you had the indefinite detention provisions added. Those remain part of law until they're repealed. So those apply forever. They don't expire at the end of 2012. Yeah.
Could you clarify any rumors that you might be considering to run for Senate?
I don't know about clarifying any of the rumors.
Use this deal, we need someone, please.
I'm considering it. I think it's a good opportunity. I'd have to feel that the momentum's right. Right now, the news cycle is obviously in favor of my positions. I think people are seeing that some of the concerns I've talked about are real concerns that we should be worried about, and that we need someone in there who's going to defend individual liberty. But I also think it's too early to decide. Michigan is a tough state to win as a Republican, and will remain so in the near future at least. So I would take it very seriously, the decision, and I would never take someone like Gary Peters for granted or take him lightly.
Last one. I've taken him out of state.
I have actually a couple different questions for you. One of them is that what is it going to take, in your opinion, to get Obama and Holder, those two at the very least, impeached, tried for treason, or anything else that can possibly get them on? And surely by this time, there's plenty that they should be able to get them on. What do you think is holding it up? And my other question is, daily I read about some of the ridiculous expenditures that are going on in the government. Obama spending millions of dollars on fixing beaches across the world, and the sexual reproduction habits of anemones and things like that. Okay, is there a discretionary fund that he gets to pick and choose? And if all of this is about funding, why don't the Republicans just cut off the funding for that, cut off the funding for Obamacare? Because all the way up until the midterm elections, when the Republicans took over the House, they kept saying over and over again, once we get the purse strings, things will change. I haven't seen it happen.
As for, with respect to impeachment of anyone, I would throw James Clapper into that list, the Director of National Intelligence, who lied to Congress and the American people about surveillance programs. And hasn't. Anyone else, if anyone else had done that, if any of you had done that in a court, for example, you'd be in prison. And why? Because the government says he's okay, he's good to go. He can just the president. The president.
But the House has the ability to impeach him.
That's right. And in order to get impeachment, you have to have the support of the leadership. No rank and file member can bring up impeachment charges and have it go anywhere. You're going to have the support of leadership, and there's just not the support there for it. So I don't,
You couldn't get it to the Senate?
That's the bottom line.
You couldn't get it to the Senate?
It wouldn't go anywhere in the Senate, but even in the House, you have to have the support of the House leadership. And there clearly isn't that support from the House leadership for that. And your second question was about appropriations. Why don't they just defund it? That's what I've been asking all along. Why do you vote in favor of appropriations that appropriate money for things we don't want? So whenever you talk about these programs and you say, and people say, well, President Obama is funding this or that, you have to remember it's Republicans who are funding it, because it starts in the House. The House passes the appropriations bill. If the president is funding something, it's because House Republicans passed it into law. So if you want to stop these kind of wasteful appropriations, you have to do it at the House, on the House side. I've not voted in favor of any appropriations bills except Veterans Affairs. So in my time there, I voted no on every single one. There was the continuing resolution right when I started, where we were allowed to offer a bunch of amendments, so a lot of the junk got defunded. I voted for that one as well. But any of the other appropriations bills, I voted no. So I've never voted for funding for Obamacare. I've never voted for funding for Planned Parenthood. But all the other members of Congress, most of them have voted for these things because they're part of the appropriations measures, and we shouldn't be funding it. So I agree with you. I think things are changing, though. We're getting more and more Republicans. I want to give you hope. There are more and more allies of mine in Congress. Things are shifting dramatically, and I'll repeat what I said at the beginning. If you think that the Republican Party is the Republican Party you see on the Sunday news shows, that's not what it is. The people who appear on those Sunday shows do not represent most rank-and-file Republicans, certainly don't represent grassroots Republicans, and don't represent what new Republican members of Congress think. And that's why they're pushing back so hard against people like me, Karl Rove and others. They're pushing back because we're a threat to them. We threaten what they've been doing, and we're independent. So we have to make a flight out to D.C., so I'm going to have to get going. But I really appreciate you having me here today. And stay strong, stay fighting for liberty, and
thank you.
Thanks for your